Hey, good Sunday, everybody. Welcome back. Hopefully, we're having a wonderful kind of end to the week here and start to the beginning of another one. It's going to be a very busy week here in the weather department. Unfortunately, I am expecting what could potentially be a hurricane landfall within the United States here before the week is up and quickly approaching. This can happen really as early as this coming Friday. We're down within a 5-day range now or so from impacts being felt. So things have moved pretty quickly here. We saw a lot of disagreement in the models over the past couple of days, but over the past 24 hours, the models have really come together. We have a much better idea of where this system is going, and I think also probably how strong it's going to be and kind of what impacts we're going to feel. So we're going to dive into all of that in today's video. Now, if you're new here and you haven't already subscribed, please do so. We're trying to get to 10,000 by the end of hurricane season, and I think we could potentially get there by the end of this month. Again, there are many viewers I have that come back every day and just aren't subscribed, so make it easy on yourself. Hit the subscribe button and hit the bell. That'll notify you every time I have the latest model guidance and post a video, just a great way to stay informed here with the weather. Also, like the video, comment, let me know what you're seeing out in your neck of the woods, and consider sharing with somebody here that could potentially be impacted by what would be, again, potential Hurricane Helene here by the time this week is done. With that said, let's go ahead and dive on into things because, again, I do want to get a lot of information out to you today in hopefully a bit of a timely manner. So we're going to start with satellite loop here, and you'll notice kind of what is the beginning of, again, what would become Helene starting to kind of show up down here in the Caribbean. In fact, we now have a 10% chance of development within the next 48 hours and an 80% chance of development within the next 7 days. I think a 70% actually within the next 7 days. We'll check again here in a second, but either way, this system is likely to develop. Don't get too caught up in the exact numbers. Just know, again, very likely we're going to see Helene here by the middle of this coming week. And again, this is one of these systems that is more homegrown. We've seen a lot of these this year that have kind of formed, relatively close to the United States. We've yet to have a storm that has formed way out into the Atlantic that we've had to track for a week or two before U.S. impacts. This has been a very homegrown season. So Helene here, will become Helene, will not be any different. Again, forming down here, likely kind of into this region and then shooting up the gap towards the Gulf Coast by the time all is said and done. So that's kind of the big story currently in the tropics. Again, if we take a look at the National Hurricane Center map this morning, you'll notice we've got a couple areas to watch. We've got a small little yellow area with a 20% chance of developing kind of out into no man's land of the Atlantic. No impacts expected with that to anybody. We have a orange area down here with a 40% chance of development here within the next 7 days. A little bit further down into the main development region. That one we will touch on in today's video. And then the bigger area here obviously is, again, this big red area that now extends from the Western Caribbean up through the Gulf of Mexico, where again Helene is likely to form by the time this week is over, and again running a 70% chance of that developing within the next 7 days. Again, though, that number will probably go up. So just know development very likely in the Gulf of Mexico, and United States impacts are also very likely due to this system. All right, let's go ahead and run through some model guidance. We're not going to have to run through as many models as we have the past couple of days because the models have really come together, and I think we're getting a better idea of what models are handling this better than some of the others. And then we'll take a look at some ensembles, and then we will briefly touch on potential impacts on a more localized scale. But again, we're still 5 days from a landfall, so we're not going to dive too deep into that. But again, I think we're a little bit more confident on the track now, so we can start to kind of rule out some areas that probably won't see impacts and start to narrow down on places that I think have a higher end chance of seeing high-end impacts out of a potential hurricane. All right, starting with the GFS model, again, the GFS has done pretty well with the system so far, and it really develops this quite early. In fact, on the GFS, we have a tropical system, a depression or storm, really as early as late Monday into Tuesday. You're seeing these closed isobars here beginning to form, and then the storm strengthens, shoots up the gap between the Yucatan and Cuba, and we have what becomes basically a hurricane here by the middle of the week. So this is Wednesday evening. You'll notice we have, again, I know it might be a little hard to read, but that's a 978 millibar low pressure right over the central Gulf of Mexico and moving northward. Again, this would probably be a pretty strong, hurricane, probably a Category 2 hurricane, so maybe not quite a major yet, but it continues to strengthen, gets down to below 970 millibars, this would be getting into major hurricane territory, continues to strengthen up to landfall, and we have a 961 millibar hurricane, probably major hurricane, making landfall here near the tip of the Florida Panhandle, kind of into the Destin area and into that surrounding kind of region. So, and again, this is even earlier than Friday. This is Thursday afternoon and evening, a landfalling hurricane. So things are moving quite quickly here with this system. Today's Sunday. This would be Thursday evening on the GFS model, as you know, a major hurricane, again, making a U.S. landfall into the Florida Panhandle and then working up through the southeast. And again, we're going to look a little bit more in depth here a little bit later on, but let's take a look at some other models and just see if we have some similarities between them. And again, I think you'll find that we actually, do have a good amount of kind of agreement in the models. So the European model now we're going to take a look at. This is getting into Tuesday afternoon. A tropical system developing here in the extreme western Caribbean, getting down to around 1,000 millibars, a little bit slower with the development here on the European model, and that's been a theme, I think, over the week. The Euro has been much slower in developing this system. Also, really, most of the hurricane season, the Euro has been a little bit more conservative here in how quickly these storms develop, but does develop it still, and we get a tropical storm. Again, this is Wednesday afternoon and evening. The GFS was a little bit further up into the central Gulf. The European still hanging down near the tip of the Yucatan, but still shows a tropical storm at the same time, just a little bit further south, moving a little bit slower and developing a little bit slower, but still does develop, strengthens like the GFS into probably a tropical storm, a borderline hurricane, and then we get a landfall into the Florida Panhandle a bit closer to the Big Bend on the European model here by the overnight Thursday and into the very early morning hours of Friday. So the difference between the models is only about 100, maybe 200 miles here between landfall and only about 6 or 8 hours time-wise, and intensity-wise, that's where the differences are a little bit bigger. The GFS, again, has probably a Category 3 storm. The European is running, tropical storm to Category 1 storm kind of range. So some differences between the models here, but much closer than we were yesterday by a lot. And I think if we take a look at one more just to kind of, really show you how much closer the models are compared to where they were, let's take a look at the Canadian model, and we'll move this out ahead into time. So we'll go into Tuesday afternoon and evening. This is overnight Tuesday into Wednesday. Here we go. Storm beginning to develop here near the tip of the Yucatan. Again, most of the models kind of shoot this right through the gap of the Yucatan and Cuba and get that center of circulation to really begin to develop, and then gets this into the Gulf as a 993 millibar low Wednesday overnight into Thursday, continues to strengthen, and then we get landfall into basically almost exactly where the GFS had it, maybe just a touch west from there as a 991 millibar tropical storm or hurricane into our Thursday afternoon. So even a touch quicker on the Canadian, and then again it moves inland, and we'll talk about the potential inland impacts here in a moment as well. So don't go anywhere for that. So again, just to kind of reiterate what I just showed you here, all three models show a developing tropical system in the Gulf of Mexico, and all three models show a landfall anywhere from the Florida Panhandle through the Big Bend of Florida. So, yesterday or a couple days ago, we had storms down near Texas, storms down near South Florida. Now we've really narrowed that path. Also, the intensity has narrowed a bit here into, again, a more defined range from high-end tropical storm to potential major hurricane. So we're getting a lot better here at, knowing where this system is going to go. And the main reason for that is the models have come together in terms of steering currents and kind of what they're expecting. So currently over the country, basically what's happening is we have a little bit of a storm system, and you folks watching in the kind of Ohio River Valley and the Great Plains will know what I'm talking about, because we're getting a lot of rain out there right now, which we'll talk about as well in today's video. But either way, we've got a storm system out here, and a reinforcing kind of trough is going to come in behind that, and this is basically going to combine into a closed-off low-pressure system, almost kind of separated from the flow here. And what's going to happen is, as we have this low pressure kind of parked over, the Kansas, Oklahoma, Missouri, Arkansas area, our storm is going to come out of the Gulf, and this low pressure is going to kind of scoop it up here towards it, and that's what's going to pull this up, likely near Florida. Again, if you're watching Alabama, Mississippi, even Louisiana, don't completely let your guard down right now. But I do think Florida is looking like the most likely landfall, kind of state right now. And again, you'll see why. Again, that upper level low pulls this storm north, pulls it up into the southeastern United States. And then something we'll have to watch is this could get stuck under a ridge of high pressure, and we could once again have another lingering tropical system over portions of the Mid-South through much of this coming weekend and the following week, which it seems like a broken record with these, somewhat stalling out storms, if you will. Although this one, I think, would probably fizzle out relatively quickly, even if the overall energy kind of gets trapped in the southern tier of the country. All right, let's take a look at some ingredients. Again, how strong do we think the storm can get? Well, again, ocean temperatures are more than conducive enough for tropical development, but let's take a look at wind shear and dry air and see if those two are going to kind of hamper development. So again, humidity map here, the green colors are more conducive for tropical development. The more beige brown colors are less conducive for tropical system strengthening. And you'll notice we get this to the middle of this week. This is Wednesday afternoon. Now through then, the storm has plenty of moisture to work with, and that's why the GFS strengthens this pretty quickly. There is some dry air lingering here. You'll notice some on one side and then some on the other side, so not a completely conducive environment, but nonetheless, the storm kind of cocoons itself a little bit here into this moist environment. And I think compared to what the models were showing yesterday, there's less dry air intrusion into the storm, which is one of the reasons that the GFS has kind of maybe upticked its intensity once again back towards major hurricane status, but still some dry air to watch for. So here's an upper level low. Again, this is helping to kind of pull this moisture up north with the storm, but on the backside, this is pushing some more of that dry desert air towards the Gulf of Mexico and towards the storm system. So I do think dry air will be at least a little bit of a limiting factor, especially the closest it gets to land, which could be a very good thing for us because a storm system that is weakening upon landfall has very different impacts than a storm system that is strengthening upon landfall. And I think this one is one that could potentially be weakening or at least kind of be steady with intensity. I don't think this is one that might be still undergoing major rapid intensification upon the final approach, which would obviously be a good thing. And then again, this dry air continues to wrap into the backside of the storm. And then, we'll see what kind of effects that has on the long run. But nonetheless, hoping that that can kind of hamper development a little bit here. All right, wind shear wise, again, in the near term, as the storm develops, it has, pretty pristine conditions here for development. And even in the wind shear department, you're noticing we have winds kind of spreading out from the center of the storm, relatively speaking. A little bit of some kind of westerly flow getting in here towards the Wednesday time frame. But overall, pretty light wind shear. I do think, though, again, upon approach to landfall, kind of from Thursday afternoon on, the wind shear will become a little bit less favorable for the storm. Again, you'll notice some stronger banding of westerly flow here getting towards the storm system. That's going to help to disrupt it a little bit. So again, as I mentioned, I think now through probably Wednesday, the storm is not going to have much problem getting its act together and strengthening. It's that last 12 to 24 hours on approach to the United States that I think conditions could become a little less favorable for intensifying, which is, again, a very good thing. An intensifying system feels very different than a weakening system upon landfall, even if it is, a pretty strong Category 2 storm, maybe even a major Category 3 storm, one that is weakening, is going to feel, maybe not even as strong as a Category 1 or 2 storm that is strengthening. So it's, it's just kind of the way it works out here, the way impacts are felt versus what the actual numbers are on a piece of paper. So nothing set in stone. Again, the storm could strengthen up to landfall, but I think personally that last little bit, much like we had with Francine, will probably weaken the storm a little bit on final approach, which would be some very good news. All right, I talked about the models getting better in alignment and into better agreement. Well, look at this. These are the ensembles from the European, the latest run, and wow, we are just much better agreement all across the board here from the European. Again, yesterday we had members kind of fizzling out down here. We had some going to Texas. We had some doing this. Now, a very well-defined, area of storm systems from Tampa Bay back through kind of Mobile, Alabama is the range on the European model, and a pretty tight cluster here right into kind of the Panama City area. Florida. So we're definitely seeing, a much more agreement, and intensity-wise, I think we're seeing some pretty good agreement here too. Probably, I would say the average on the European ensembles is around a Category 1 storm, moving up towards the, landfall location here into the panhandle of Florida. Now, let's take a look at the GFS and its ensemble members. Excuse me. We are seeing a little bit more disagreement, but still better than it was yesterday. We have kind of one cluster here towards Florida from much of the Big Bend, even back down towards the Tampa Bay and Fort Myers area, and then another cluster here kind of near Mobile and Biloxi. So seeing a couple of differences here in the models. And again, this all is going to come down to how the storm interacts with that cutoff low over the southern United States. If the low is here and maybe pulls a little bit more this way, then we could get a scenario like this. If it's a little bit further towards the east, then we're going to get a scenario that maybe pulls it. Well, should draw low pressure, not high pressure, probably. Sorry about that. If we get the low pressure here, then this might help pull it a little bit more towards potentially even, the I-4 corridor of Florida. So there are still definitely question marks in the forecast, but much better agreement than we had this time yesterday, and especially what we had this time on Friday, where the models were still really kind of all over the place. So definitely good to see some of that agreement here coming on in towards approaching landfall. All right, let's dive in a little bit to potential impacts, and I'm not going to beat this to death here because, again, the storm we don't really know everything about yet. It hasn't even formed, but I think now that we have more confidence in the models, we can discuss this a little bit more, so we'll go ahead and do that. All right, here we go. This is Thursday morning on the GFS model. And again, timing-wise, I don't want you to read too much into the exact timing, but no, give or take 12 or 24 hours, this is probably going to be pretty close. I think at this point, Thursday is going to be the first day that we see kind of direct impacts from this system. Again, going to be right over the heart of the Gulf of Mexico. And again, I'll reiterate, this could be here, this could be a little bit further over here, but it's going to be somewhere into this region. And I think it's going to be close enough. We'll probably see some feeder bands or some outer bands from this system moving over the Florida Peninsula and even into the panhandle of Florida by Thursday afternoon. And then eventually, again, sometime Thursday afternoon, evening, overnight into Friday, we're going to get a landfall with this system. And another thing I will add here, I've been talking a lot about the size of the storm over the last little bit. Let me go ahead and move this to, let's see if we have MSLP. I'm going to have to move it to a different map. Give me 1 second here. Sorry, you're going to see how this kind of works on the fly a little bit. Right. Okay. So again, I was talking about how, this would be a large storm, and I've been mentioning that a good little bit here. This still does look like a large storm, but I think the size of it has come down a little bit compared to what the models were showing maybe a day or two ago, which is a good thing. Again, less people are going to feel the big time impacts out of it, but still a pretty moderately sized storm here. Also, the smaller the storm gets, the stronger it probably is going to have the ability to get here, as that core is going to be a little more tight and compact. So that's going to be something that we need to watch here upon approach with the system. Again, likely a landfall anywhere from, we'll say, Mississippi to Tampa, but I think really the models are kind of honing in a little bit closer down towards the Florida Panhandle here. Again, 961 millibar low, major hurricane on the GFS. Again, I said it before, intensity, we're going to have to wait and see here, but we'll switch this back to precipitation and kind of zoom it back into the southeastern United States just so you can see this a little bit better. Some of the threats we're going to see out of this, again, storm surge absolutely will be a threat, depending obviously on how strong it is, will tell us the severity of the surge. But if we have a major hurricane like the GFS shows, we're going to get big time surge somewhere on the right-hand side of this storm. So again, we'll have to wait to see exactly where landfall is for that. Also, the core, this would bring big time wind gusts for sure to portions of, again, wherever it makes landfall, most likely probably into the Florida Panhandle right now, at least is what the models are kind of agreeing on. Tornado threat, this would bring a tornado threat. This would probably bring a flooding threat as well. And you'll notice this is landfall, we'll say Thursday at 8 p.m. on the GFS. By the time we get to 8 a.m., the storm has moved from the Florida Panhandle up into northern Alabama. So not necessarily crawling by any means, but also not moving at a super quick pace. And then kind of after that, we'll see what happens. I think we're a lot more confident that, this will make landfall somewhere into this region right now compared to how confident we are in the impacts after the fact in the southeast. But with it, like any tropical system, we'll have to watch for a flooding threat. We'll have to watch for a tornado threat, and maybe even a wind threat inland as well. So I know I didn't talk a lot there about impacts, but I think we need to get a little bit closer to where we think the system will make landfall before we go super in-depth into impacts. But again, just note that we are going to see probably hurricane impacts somewhere into the Gulf Coast region. Probably even likely, I would say the state of Florida would be the most likely place right now to see that. But again, we have now till probably Thursday or Friday till landfall. So you folks in Alabama, Mississippi, even Louisiana, especially closer towards kind of eastern Louisiana. Do not let your guard down, as some of those ensemble members still kind of keep you in play a little bit. All right, taking a look at other areas in the tropics, we do have another area of concern out here into the main development region. And again, this is one that isn't a super big concern right now by any means, but it is worth noting a lot of our models do develop this by the end of the week. And again, the NHC did have that 40% chance of development. And again, we take a look at the ensembles. A lot of the European ensembles developing this. The good news, most of them curve it out to sea. In fact, really all of them curve it out to sea. So not something I'm super concerned about right now. If anything changes in the models, if this looks like maybe it could get closer to land, we'll spend more time on it. But until then, just know it is out there, but not really a super big concern. All right, let's talk about what's happening back home here because, again, obviously the tropics are very important, but we do have some active weather happening through the lower 48. And again, the same storm system kind of that's bringing all this active weather is what's going to help steer future Helene here likely into, again, the eastern Gulf Coast of the United States. So it's important that we take a look at that as well. Now, satellite imagery, again, a big plume of some kind of cloud top showing up here. We've got a lot of rain falling through much of the lower 48. We still have this coastal low off the northeast, although that one dissipating a little bit. I think the bigger kind of area to talk about, again, is going to be this unsettled weather right through the heart of the country here. And that is going to be something that swings on through for a while here. Now, we take a look at radar. Again, a lot of rain falling from Wisconsin down through Illinois, into Missouri, Iowa, Kansas, portions of Nebraska, even into the Denver area, back down through Oklahoma City and Texas. A lot of rain falling this morning. Again, also a little bit of rain left over here just offshore of the Northeast. So a pretty active scene on radar for sure, and it's going to stay that way for a while here. Now, we take a look at watches, warnings, and advisories. Not really seeing any severe weather or flooding out of this currently, but we do have some frost advisories in effect for portions of the Midwest here into the northern Great Plains and even up into portions of the northern Rockies, which is probably going to be a little bit of a surprise because, again, it has been quite warm for many folks here, and it's going to stay that way. But still, we are getting pretty late into the year here with just a little bit of cold air kind of shooting down into this region. It will be enough to bring the potential for some frost in the mornings, and you would kind of expect that here. We're getting towards late September, and this is the far northern tier of the country, so not really too out of the normal there. All right, so the way we're going to do this is we're going to talk about this storm system through the next little bit, and then we'll dive in region by region here, East Coast and West Coast, and then talk about some rainfall impacts, some severe weather potential, and those temperatures as well, because, again, I know it's hot for a lot of you. We'll talk a little bit about those anomalies. So again, currently and into this early week, we've got the storm system. It's going to kind of move again from Colorado to portions of, we'll say, Missouri probably is a safe bet for where the storm will probably be over by tomorrow and into Tuesday. But what's going to happen is look to the north, another kind of shot of some troughing shoots down, and the systems kind of combine together. And again, this is how we're getting this cutoff low from the flow. And the way you know it's cut off is we have this massive ridge to the north, and then just kind of this area of lower heights, getting stuck under that big ridge of high pressure or cut off from the main jet stream. So it's kind of where the term cutoff low comes from. And it's one of those setups that could create havoc on the forecast and make big time differences between one area of the country and another area. Again, just depending under, what area of these heights you're under. If you're to the north in the Dakotas, it's going to be really hot. If you're right under the center of this cutoff low, it's going to be a tad bit cooler and probably rainier and cloudier as well. So again, it'll be very important where this sets up shop, but just know that is what we're expecting to happen here. And then obviously, like we talked about, that's going to pull Helene north likely, and then probably, that cutoff low could remain over the southern tier of the country for a while. This even gets 10 days out, and it's still kind of just meandering over the mid-south and southeast. So due to that cutoff low and the first storm system we're seeing right now, we are expecting some severe weather today. Again, only a marginal risk. Main threats would be strong straight line winds and a little bit of hail here from extreme southern Illinois through the Ozarks back down towards Tulsa, Oklahoma City, and into west central Texas. Here could see some strong storms today, and then tomorrow the potential again for a couple strong storms. Again, same threats would mainly be straight line winds and some hail through northern Tennessee, southern Kentucky, and then back through the Ozarks as well. Again, just seeing enough kind of spin in the atmosphere to allow some of these storms to maintain themselves, long enough to potentially cause a little bit of some severe weather. All right, let's kind of time this out a little bit for your Sunday afternoon and through kind of the week ahead. So this afternoon, again, a big plume of moisture moving right through the heart of the country, Kansas, through Missouri, Illinois, Indiana, even up through Michigan. I know I've got some viewers there. You're going to see some rain today. And again, I do want to note there is a severe weather threat. So if you were watching down here, again, through west central Texas, through Oklahoma City, Tulsa, and then kind of just into this circle region, any of these storms could become strong to severe this afternoon. If you're watching north of there through kind of northern Indiana, Illinois, Ohio, and Michigan, I think more of just a good old-fashioned steady soaking rainfall, probably less of a severe weather threat that way. But you'll notice we get overnight tonight, and then we get into our Monday afternoon, and all of this moves eastbound. This rain moving through the Northeast, Pennsylvania, New York State, even up into New England, and still Monday afternoon. Again, don't rule out a severe weather threat. In fact, I'm even going to draw a little bit of a bigger area than the Storm Prediction Center has issued. Really anywhere in this region through the Ohio and Tennessee River Valley. Probably should say Tennessee River Valley more so. Even back towards the Western Carolinas, Western Virginia, and into West Virginia. Through the Little Rock area, the Ozarks, any of these areas could see a storm or two that gets strong to severe Monday afternoon. And once again, to the north of that, through the Northeast, just more of a steady soaking rainfall. Sorry about that. That is going to be more of the impact there compared to a severe weather threat. And then you'll notice we get this overnight Monday into Tuesday. More of that rain continuing to work on through the southeast. So a pretty stormy kind of wet pattern here to start the week for a lot of folks. And we move this further ahead into time. And I think that'll be a common theme. Notice these showers continue to work on through probably more areas of storminess Wednesday afternoon through some of the same areas of the mid-south and southeast. It continues to stay quite wet and showery through the northeast through the middle of the week. And then obviously by the time we get to the end of the week, here comes what would be Helene. And then that'll bring its own impacts to the forecast here. So a pretty active week across the board, whether you're getting, a direct landfalling hurricane or not, we're going to see some showers and storms over much of the country. Now, out west, it's kind of flipped the script a little bit. We had stormy weather out west, relatively calm weather in the east. We've flipped the roles here. We have stormy weather in the east, and we move this ahead out west. Again, could see a storm system try to work through the Pacific Northwest. That could bring some showers and maybe some very high elevation snowfall during the middle of the week through Washington State. But other than that, I move this through the week. Again, another storm system clips Washington State later in the week. But not much happening through the next week out in this part of the country. So again, kind of have flipped the roles here just a little bit. All right, rainfall totals. This is just now through Friday because I didn't want to necessarily show the impacts from Helene yet. Again, this is just good old-fashioned rain from this frontal system and these storms that are kind of passing on through. You'll notice a good amount of us going to pick up on at least a couple inches of rain through the Ohio River Valley, the Appalachia chain. From North Carolina north could get a couple inches of rain. Pennsylvania looking at some good rain back towards west central Texas. Again, could be a hot spot for some higher end rainfall. But just in general, many of us in the east going to see some sort of rain through this week up ahead, now through really this coming Friday. And then obviously Helene after the fact can add even more to some of those totals depending on where exactly that storm system goes. All right, final thing I'm going to show you here is temperature outlook. And again, it's been very hot, and that's not really going to change for most of us. Now, I'll mention we're just moving this ahead to Wednesday afternoon, and you'll kind of notice the reason I paused it here is you're seeing these blue areas, and you're thinking, okay, well, that's nice. This is mainly just due to rain falling. This isn't that we have a colder air mass per se by any means. This is just a lot of rain and cloud cover keeping those high temperatures down. But look to the north of there where we're not seeing rain, up into Montana, the Dakotas. We're 20 to 30 degrees above what we should be this time of year, and it has been hot in general, even where we're not seeing rain in the southeast, 5 to 10 degrees above what we should be this time of year. And unfortunately, for those of you looking for fall weather, that's going to stay that way for a while. Again, where we get the rain, it's going to be cooler. So again, you're noticing a lot of blue by the end of this week. That's mainly rain from Helene, kind of, working inland, still seeing some showers in the northeast due to that coastal system that really just refuses to leave. And, again, some of those blues try to, do a little bit of magic. I will mention by later on in the week, if that upper level low kind of hangs around a little bit, we could see some cooler temperatures, and by cooler I mean much cooler temperatures wherever that system is. But again, upper level lows are kind of tough to forecast exactly where they're going to be. So this model shows it over Oklahoma, Arkansas, through the Kansas City area. That could shift east. It could even shift west, but if anything, I think it would shift east probably. And that's just the theme. Hot temperatures where it's not raining, cooler temperatures where we've got that cutoff low. flow kind of helping us out a little bit. We'll see. Again, this is way out into La La Land, but some of the models show maybe a bit more of a significant cold front. I mean, this isn't even until, like October. So it's going to be this way for a while, unfortunately. And again, just kind of not that fun. But anyway, I appreciate y'all hanging in there. Hopefully you found some use in the video. Again, if you haven't subscribed, definitely do so. Like the video and share it with somebody you think might find it interesting. With that said, have a wonderful rest of your Sunday. Stay safe out there, and I'll see you all next time.